In 1937, a podiatrist named Doc Noss discovered a cache of Apache gold on what is now the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. Scouting a rocky outcropping called Victorio Peak while deer hunting, Noss took refuge from the heavy rainstorm in a cave. Exploring, he stumbled upon an old mine shaft that led him to thousands of crudely smelted gold bars stacked in rows like bricks. Tragically, Noss was never able to cash in on this treasure because, whilst using explosives in an attempt to widen the cave's opening, he mistakenly created a landslide that sealed it forevermore. The legend of Noss's lost gold gained widespread attention. But where did the riches he had seen come from originally? Theories abound, from the repository of a 19th century Apache war chief to a secret stash from the Aztecs. Treasure hunters world over have come to Victorio's Peak to find Noss's fortune, but none have been successful. Many believe the lost treasure is still buried somewhere in rubble and possibly guarded by the military. Is it possible ancient treasure from a lost civilization lay buried beneath Victorio's Peak? And if so, what else could be beneath this strange area? Researchers like Greg Braden point out that there is more to this area than gold. There is actually a much more ancient system that stretches over 4 states.
What we found in these areas, not so much that there is a hollow space under the desert, but there is a tunnel system, a network that connects many of the indigenous traditions in this part of the world from the area in southwestern Colorado, northern New Mexico, down towards Wild Horse Mesa. And it is this natural system of caverns that the native people say many of their traditions relate to. So they were created naturally through volcanic environments, and then they were modified to become more useful over later generations. But what the ancestors say is that in the past, this is where people have lived when the cataclysms of the past destroyed the surface of the earth. And now we have physical evidence in New Mexico and Colorado. The geologic evidence does not support the hollow earth theory in the sense of a complete space in the center of the earth. It does support within the crust itself a series of tunnels and catacombs that were created naturally and have been known and used by our ancestors, by native peoples in the past.
It's interesting that we find this idea of treasures within the earth, hidden gold, and things of this nature that actually tie in with Native American lore. For instance, you have Chickamastock, the 7 caves or the 7 cities of gold from Aztec stories. You have to wonder, how much truth there is to it. At the same time, you have this whole idea that goes back to stories of the underworld containing treasure, whether it's the dwarves or it's the alchemists looking for gold in the depths of the earth.
Now, these sites are very controversial because they force historians to rethink the traditional story.
Could this be true? Many of these underground caverns in North America are located in the Four Corners region, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. This rugged and arid geographic land, also known as the Colorado Plateau, is predominantly owned by Native American tribes, including the Hopi Nation. In Hopi folklore, it is written that the Indians' ancestors climb onto the surface of our Earth from an underworld. This indigenous tribe believes that the current incarnation of mankind is the fourth world, and that the prior 3 occurred inside the Earth.
What's intriguing about the Hopi tradition is the notion of previous cycles of civilization that comes across, which are brought to an end cataclysmically, and then there's a re-emergence and another cycle of civilization occurs. That's the message that I take from the Hopi traditions, that they are urging us to cast our minds back into remote prehistory. And they're saying we are not recent comers. We lived through a series of cataclysms, and we remade the earth each time after those cataclysms. When you look at the actual structures on the ground in that area, if you go to Shaco Canyon or places like this, but there's the suggestion that we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg and that there's a much older heritage behind all of this.
If this indeed is just the tip of the iceberg to something far more mysterious, what other evidence could suggest that there is an unseen power in this area? Freddie Silva brings us to another location in the Four Corners called Shiprock.
I've seen grown men weep at the sight of Shiprock, or if you want to call it by its real name, Sebitai. And it's one of the most powerful places on Earth for a number of reasons. One, it's described as a navel of the Earth, and any place called a navel of the Earth is essentially a power point, as you'd expect from a navel. And it's a place of beginning where the Anasazi are said to, and I quote, land here from Venus on a metal bird, and when the bird recognized that the people were safe, the bird went into the ground and rose up as Shiprock. You can see it for about 60 miles in any direction. It's a sacred spot. We should respect that. It's one of those few places on Earth where I feel I can actually hear the braves singing and dancing around me, and I actually join in. It sounds like the craziest thing, but the energy is so unadulterated, so powerful, so potent, it doesn't have to show it. It is itself. And you are suddenly reminded that you're actually crossing a veil. It's hard to put into words unless you've experienced this, but that's the power of a place like that.
Could this navel of the Earth be a place where people could cross over into other dimensions?
When it comes to exploring Native American lore, and in particular legends about the underworld, the Four Corners area is particularly important because we have a number of Native American groups that claim to have emerged there. And by that I mean they have an emergence myth that says that they came out of the earth. The Pueblo people believed that they had come out of the earth in that area, around the Grand Canyon area. We have the Hopi, who claim they came out of what they call the Sipapu, which is basically the name for a little hole as part of their chimney system in Akiva. But they claim that they had to come out of something they called the Sipapu, and they had come out of the underworld where they had interacted with reptilian humanoids called the snake people and the lizard people. And they had also interacted with another group called the ant people. The ant people are described basically in a way that sounds very much like so-called descriptions of modern-day gray aliens. We have this whole idea here that there's a series of worlds beneath, and they all have their own inhabitants, and that these Native American people said they had come up through these various regions to eventually emerge in our world. We have the Apache, who have a similar legend that says they came through a series of caverns to our world after they lived in a place called the Old Fireland, which had been destroyed in a cataclysm and had sunk beneath the ocean. And they claimed that they had come here through a series of caverns, just as the Aztecs said. We also have the Navajo, and the Navajo believe that they came out of the underworld as well. So these are themes that all tie into the Four Corners area, and it's very interesting that the various people, some of them were even adversaries in previous centuries, that they all have similar legends about worlds within our world.
If the premise that modern mankind originated from caverns deep below the Earth is true, then is it also possible that there are entire civilizations still living underground in the Four Corners region?
I live near Taos, New Mexico, and there is a phenomenon that is called the hum, the Taos hum, H-U-M. It is a vibration that is felt selectively by some people. Other people don't seem to know it at all. It usually happens between 2 and 4 a.m. when a lot of people are sleeping. And the hum, it's right on the verge of where you feel it in your heart and where you can just below the audible level. And no one knows where this hum is coming from. They brought in university researchers back in the 1980s to try to triangulate where, if they could find 3 locations where they found the hum and triangulate, they could find a source. And what they found was that it's coming from everywhere, suggesting that there is a vibration happening within the Earth during those periods of time, 2, 3, 4 a.m., that is being carried through the bedrock into these other areas. What is the source of that vibration? This is where the speculation comes in, that these natural tunnels and the caves and the caverns that our ancestors have talked about in the past that already exist are being modified, perhaps, and used in modern ways for storage, for earth sensing, geosensing applications and things like that. So that is where the scientific community kind of has arrived, is that there is something, they think maybe it is the drilling, the constant drilling to modify these caverns that's creating the vibration.
Since 1946, the U.S. government has been using Hopi land in the Four Corners region for explosive testing. Is it possible that, in fact, these tests are a cover-up? Could the military be using the ancient power of this area to run covert military programs? Or could their true agenda be to destroy something that was discovered underground, perhaps something from an ancient galaxy? Billy Carson entails his personal encounter at the Four Corners area.
It appears that a lot of this activity and a lot of these tunnels congregate close to this Four Corners area. Now, there's well-known stone-based stargates, is what the ancient Indians call them, and now the modern Indians are saying these are where their relatives used to go and put their heads in and actually chant some words and disappear. And then some of them will return. Last summer, I went to Arizona to see the Grand Canyon. We actually hired a helicopter and a guide to go down there because I wanted to find out if I can see any of these ancient mysteries that people have been talking about. And we landed on this Indian reservation down inside the canyon. And there's a special area that was cordoned off. So I said to the guy, I said, why can't I come over here? I don't understand. I don't see anything dangerous. He said, because NASA has taken over this part of the canyon.
The way the grid system runs across the Earth, there are several places that are just like heavily energetic nodes. You'll find on many reservations and other holy areas held by natives, you will find that military groups have gone in and built facilities and made them off limits. A lot of the time, these are actual entrances into this cavern system that honeycombs the entire Earth. A lot of these places are sacred to natives because they have stories going back many millennia of different types of beings taking them below the Earth before cataclysms to protect them. And these same beings, after the cataclysm, would bring them back to the surface of the Earth and help them set up their civilizations again. A lot of these areas that the military will lock down also are very strong vortexes, which basically are nodes in this cosmic web Stargate system. These are places that the military want locked down because they don't want you to see what's coming and going through these gates.
A lockdown? If this is true, who or what could possibly be traveling through these gates or in these underground caverns? Perhaps we should consider one of the less conventional theories of evolution. If it is possible that the DNA of human beings was originally bioengineered by ancient terrestrials, could this be a link? William Bramley points out how this idea is explained in Hopi folklore.
You have this possibility, at least within the lore. You don't necessarily exclude skyborn gods from gods that lived underground because people had both ideas, that the gods had realms underground, underwater, and in the sky, and they interacted with all of them. We already know that very large caverns here and there. It may be, for example, that the South American tribe, maybe the Hopi, maybe they found some of these at one time, or at least they found caverns big enough where they believe that some of these things could transpire. So it's not necessarily a contradiction. It just means that the gods operated in these different realms.
When we look at the creation stories of our past, as different as they are from one another, there are common themes that weave them all together. I find this fascinating because it is the local understanding of a common heritage, I believe, that is preserved in the traditions of the modern indigenous peoples. One of the most obvious of these common threads is the theme of another world beneath this one, a world, subterranean world, from which our ancestors emerged.
A lot of these themes from Native American folklore have found their way into modern day accounts of what I call modern folklore, which would be ufology, cryptozoology, all these types of things, conspiracy literature. Really, all this stuff is just an update of folklore. It's the same stuff that people have done for centuries. Sometimes it contains truth, sometimes it contains fabrications, sometimes people elaborate on what they think something means. But we see these ideas of underworlds involved with variety of peoples around the world now emerging in these same areas. All these things touch on this same type of material.
With these subterranean creation stories of the world from which our ancestors emerged, is there perhaps a code or a treasure that could have been left for us to figure out the truth of humanity's connections to the Four Corners?
New Mexico, Arizona, the whole area around the Four Corners, and Utah, of course, and southern Colorado, it's actually one of the most spiritually active parts of North America. And this is why that part of America is it draws so many people. Some of them might know it, some of them don't, but they are drawn there nevertheless. I think it's because the land is worked with. The land is a living organism. If you work with it, just like watering a plant, it gives you something back. It gives you back a certain pleasure, and that's what you're attracted to. So that's why that part of the country is so important, because it's still alive. It's worked with on a daily basis, and you can feel that as you just drive through it. There is the Navajo sites, there is Mesa Verde as well, there is Bandelier, there's a kiva up on Bandelier that if you happen to go there at the end of the day and time it so you don't get caught up inside the park, you have to climb up a 100-foot ladder. And that place is perfectly positioned inside the natural cave in a really awkward area of the park, because that's the one spot where the Earth's telluric currents just happen to cross. You know, and they're everywhere, these currents are everywhere. But they built this sacred site exactly where those currents cross, and you go inside the kiva and you have this outer body experience, because this energy is made of the same stuff that we're made of. It's literally just giving you a means, a technology in which to escape the physical world and connect to another level of reality.
Greg Braden takes us deep into another structure in the Four Corners area that may give us an insight into how this location connects to the sky and what may lie below.
One of the greatest mysteries that we're finding of ancient civilization is right in our own backyard for those of us that live in the United States, in the high deserts of northern New Mexico, Chaco Canyon. Something happened in Chaco Canyon 1,100 plus years ago that we have never seen in the history of the world before, and we never saw duplicated since that time. We still do not know precisely who the people were that built Chaco Canyon, where they came from, why they had the advanced technology, why they had the mathematics, why they had the astronomy, the architecture, the ability to grow food in one of the most harshest environments. It's 12 miles long, 2 miles wide in some places. Within the canyon itself, there are over 2,800 archaeological sites that have been recognized. Of those 2,800, 32 have been excavated, and because they cannot be sustained, many of them were reburied to preserve them for later generations. 12 are now restored, and it's those 12 that are telling the story. That is opening the door to forbidden territory when it comes to archaeology, advanced civilizations of our past. One of the most notable places in Chaco Canyon is Pueblo Bonito. It is a very unique D-shaped architectural complex. Over 900 rooms were built into this Pueblo Bonito. Some of them are square, some of them are the circular chambers, the kivas, that play such a significant role in the traditions of the native peoples throughout the desert Southwest. And one of the reasons that this circular chamber is so important is because it ties directly into their creation story. In the circular chambers, in the kivas, there was a place at one end of the kiva called the sipapu. And the sipapu, in the native traditions, is where our ancestors from the past emerged from another world beneath this world. They emerge into this world time and time again. This ties in beautifully to some of the creation stories that we find everywhere from Sumeria to the Mesoamerican traditions in the Yucatan. There's a common theme that runs through all of these stories, and that common theme is that the people emerge from a world that is underneath, it is below the world that we know now.
Is this yet another reference to human creation beneath the surface? What might be Chaco Canyon's connection to the stars?
When the Viking missions began sending back the images from Mars, over 19,000 images from the orbiter it was circling. And as those images now have been refined and we have a better sense of what they are, lo and behold, there is on the surface of Mars a temple complex that looks precisely like an unexcavated Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, the very unique D-shaped structure that we find nowhere else on this planet in the past. It's nothing that we find contemporary. The only other place we find an example of this structure is on the surface of Mars. Now, the people of Chaco Canyon, we don't know, as I mentioned, precisely who they are, but we know that they had an advanced understanding of physics, of astronomy and mathematics. There's a place in Chaco, a 400-foot tall butte called Fajada Butte. And at the top of Fajada Butte is a mysterious structure that scientists are now calling the North American Stonehenge. Now, you wouldn't necessarily know that to look at it because there are 3 vertical slabs made of the same material as the native Earth. In the 1970s, it was recognized that on the solstice and on the equinox, the way the sun comes and the light shines through these slabs against a spiral design on the wall at the back of the slabs, it actually pinpoints precisely the summer solstice and the equinox, as well as lunar cycles. And this was something that has never been seen before. It's so rare that scientists were reluctant to even embrace the possibility that it was actually happening. And it was only when laser-guided imagery was used to mimic the solstices and the equinoxes at different times of year that scientists were able to pinpoint precisely that, yes, this is what was happening on Fajada Butte.
If the Four Corners area holds some kind of power beneath the Earth that humans might have emerged from, is it possible that the inhabitants of Chaco Canyon built these locations to connect with an ancient spacefaring race beyond Earth?
What the scientists found was that from Chaco Canyon were a series of roads that radiate in perfect lines from Chaco into other archaeological sites like Hovenweep and Mesa Verde, for example, and the Aztec National Monument. Perfect lines, perfect roads. When they reached a rock or a boulder in the middle of the road, they didn't go around. They went right up over. They're absolutely perfect. And part of the reason this is a mystery is because these people had no wheels. What were they using a perfect road, absolutely straight, 36 inches wide with no wheels in their culture? What were they using these roads for? This is one of the mysteries that the scientists are looking at now, because it appears that Chaco was never inhabited to the full extent that it could have been. It had the ability to sustain thousands and thousands of people, but there's no evidence that those thousands of people ever lived there. So now the thinking is that it was a gathering place during very specific times that were predicted and calculated by Fajada Butte, where people from the other traditions would converge on Chaco using these roads. And many of the astronomical images that we're seeing now link Chaco to what we see happening in Venus, what we see happening on Mars. So it's very possible that what we're seeing in Chaco Canyon is an example of an advanced technology using the materials that are available in this world to mimic and duplicate a knowledge and a wisdom that has been known from somewhere in the past.
Could Chaco Canyon be mimicking something more ancient than we know today? Andrew Collins suggests that the ancient people were following a pathway of the skies that would lead them home. Is it possible these ancient people had a different understanding of their existence here?
The soul comes from, let's say, the sky world, up there somewhere, and returns there at the point of death. But there's something more beyond that, that some part of us comes from the stars themselves, and that at the point of incarnation, that something, we call it the soul or the spirit, embodies within flesh and blood and exists, and that this gives us this connection to the stars, that the soul or spirit actually comes from an extraterrestrial or a starry source, and that when we're released at the point of death, it goes back from whence it came. But in connection with this were various stars that were seen as personification of influences and intelligences that were either markers on that route to reach the sky world, or helped or enabled the soul as supernatural beings to achieve that aim. There seems to be a consistent route, and that route would seem to have been, symbolically at least, and maybe in actuality in some manner, connected with the Milky Way, what we can see of the edge of the Milky Way. This bright, beautiful, starry stream that comes up from the horizon, goes, arches over our heads, down to the other horizon. Something that we barely perceive today, living in urban environments for the most part. But if you go to, remote parts of the world in its totality, and it's beautiful, and you don't understand just how important this would have been to our ancestors, seeing something like this rising up into the sky. And the ancestors believed that this was the route. They called it the path of souls in Native American tradition.
If these ancient people did have this knowledge, how is this connected to what might lie below the four corners?
Breakaway civilizations and things of that nature. The ancient civilizations like pre-Adamites, if these beings created a high level of civilization before we did, and may long ago have reached quantum computing levels, even using the crystalline structure of the earth itself to achieve godlike powers, and hence they became the gods to a lot of ancient people. So when you look at these ancient beings that are described in the ancient text, and you look at the modern day UFO accounts, you're probably really looking at the same beings, but that does not mean that they're coming from across the galaxy. There's a good bit of evidence that the Earth has been bombarded by various cataclysms over the ages, everything from asteroid impact to solar events. When these things happen, civilizations that might be on the surface are going to be devastated. There's really no way around this. I mean, if you don't know it's coming, then the effect on your civilization is going to be catastrophic. We find this again and again in stories about these ancient beings who preceded us here on the planet and who may still actually be here. Richard Shaver, who is the creator of something called the Shaver Mystery, he said that these beings fled underground when the radiation coming from the sun became so deadly, whereas before they lived for thousands of years, they quickly found that their solar radiation was destroying their DNA, and they fled beneath the surface of the earth, and they and their descendants, in a greatly modified form due to other types of radiation which are found inside the earth, are still there to this day. That's not to say that you wouldn't have to have a really advanced level of not just civilization, but technology in order to carve out a space inside the crust of the planet and to make a sustainable environment there. And of course, there are elements there which could provide this.
Sonia Grace uses her alternative research to dive even deeper into the layers of the four corners.
So I went back in time and spirit traveled to an ancient site that my guides took me to called Chaco Canyon. It's in the four corners of the Southwest. The Savrock immediately ushered us inside the rocks. There was like an opening and we went inside, and they said, "We want to show you this because this is what happened to the Anasazi people." We took them through this underground tunnel. And we literally returned the people that we could to the very place that they began before they migrated north, which was to the Mayan culture. The Savrock helped the Mayan people long time before that. The whole migration story of the Hopis, where they migrated in 4 directions, came out of an ancient culture down in Mexico. And this was very interesting that the Savrock would intervene and help some of these people back to this place. It's how they actually disappeared. The rest of them disappeared because the Anunnaki also came and took several of these people, hundreds of them, from the Anasazi community. This site and all of the Southwest is filled with portals. There's all kinds of energy going on there, especially extraterrestrial energy. There's all kinds of energy in the Southwest.
Could it be that what Doc Noss apparently stumbled across was ancient treasure from some of these cultures as they survived cataclysms? Is it possible that the Four Corners area holds a certain kind of energy that opens up doorways to other worlds? If this is true, how are Mayans and ancient cultures in Mexico attached to this area in the American Southwest?
The foundation of the Aztec nation. Now that location was known as Chicomoztoc. That means the 7 caves. And this was like some kind of subterranean structure. One of them has them coming from a place called Aztlan. And this is suggested to be somewhere in the southwest United States.
Could the mysterious Four Corners be linked to more ancient cultures that migrated south? Could this have been the location of the creation story for the Aztecs? Up next, the code continues to unravel as we head south of the border to Mexico.